Hello everybody, again this is Mr. Carball, and just like in the other video lecture and all video lectures you're going to see, you need to have your notes out. So this video lecture is on notes number 6 on America during World War II. So please once again, talking to the text, make sure you annotate, make sure you ask questions. We will be discussing this stuff in class, so you need to make sure that you have that done. So here we go, video lecture notes number 6. There are several different categories that we're going to talk about, sections that we're going to talk about in notes number 6. Mainly, it's about U.S. society during World War II. Just like in World War One, when you have a massive war like World War One was, well, they called it the Great War for a reason. It's a huge war. Society has to change to accommodate. World War II was even bigger, therefore the changes had to be as well very large. So we're going to talk about a little bit about getting the U.S. ready for war, about the women, about minorities, the economy, and ending with Japanese internment. Society really changed during the war. So let's get started. Getting ready for the war. First thing is December 7th, 1941. What happened? Come on, think about it. Think about it. That's right, Pearl Harbor attack. So the Pearl Harbor attack happened a day before, and on December 8th, we declared war. So now that you declare war, what do you need? First thing you're gonna need is money, and we'll get to that later. Second thing you need is a military. Well, the United States military was very small. So one of the things that did happen after Pearl Harbor is a lot of people were very nationalistic. And again, nationalism is the pride in your country, and you want to fight for it. You want to prove your country being number one. So a lot of people ran to the recruiting office and they enlisted to go into the military. But the United States had a problem. They have two wars. One, a land war in Europe, and two, an air and sea war against the Japanese. So when you have two major wars going at the same time, you're going to need a lot of soldiers. So all those people who enlisted in the military, they still needed more. So they had to have something called a draft, the Selective Service System. We've talked about drafts before. Once again, a draft is when you are required to go to war to defend your country. It is not optional. You get a piece of paper that says you have to report to a certain place because you're going to go to boot camp and then off to where you go. If you don't go, you become what's called a draft dodger. We're going to get to more of that on the Vietnam War unit, but basically they put a warrant for your arrest because you need to go. It's not optional. So they drafted millions, 3 million people into World War II. Now the thing is, if you have 3 million men going into World War II, that means there's going to be 3 million men not in the United States, and that's going to make a major change in society. One of the major changes is going to be jobs. If all these men leave, who's going to take over for them? There are two groups that help out. One is going to be minorities. Lots of minorities are going to move into major cities and take over jobs of the men. But the biggest group by far is going to be women. Women are going to play a big role in World War II. There was tons of propaganda created by the U.S. government that basically try to convince women that it's your job to help. In fact, propaganda was everywhere that it was everybody's job to help because society had to get behind World War II. It wasn't just that let the soldiers fight and we'll deal with our own stuff here. It's everything has to be World War II related. In simple, if you have a bicycle and the bicycle is made out of metal and they need metal, you're going to have to recycle your bicycle to get the metal to them so they could build weapons and bullets and all the other stuff that they need. So unfortunately, sacrifice was needed. Women are going to play a big role in that. Two ways. One is military. They're actually going to join the military. Now, they're not going to join the military in terms of they're going to go get machine guns and off to the front wars they go, off to fight they go. They're going to join the military in positions like nurses, secretaries, and phone operators. So once again, nurses, secretaries, phone operators. So why would that be such a huge help? Well, the main reason that is a huge help is because before women did those jobs, who else did them? Think about it. Who would do those jobs in the military before women did it? Well, of course, men did it. So if women are joining in huge numbers into the military to do those jobs, what does that mean for all the men who used to do them? Well, those men can now go and fight for their country, meaning the military just got bigger. Fighting force just got bigger, which is a huge thing. Now, these women, when they joined the Women's Army Corps, the WAC, they were soldiers. They had to show up on time. It wasn't a casual thing. They had to wear the uniform. They had to march. They had to do what a soldier had because they were soldiers. Not fighting soldiers, but they were soldiers nonetheless. Women are also going to be huge in industries, factories, where these men leave and women need to take up the slack. there was a big propaganda trying to tell women that, look, you are strong enough, you are smart enough to do these jobs. Rosie the Riveter, one of the posters that you'll see in the images of this unit, is a perfect example of that. She has her bandana on top of her, hair all up. She has a kind of like a worker shirt on that's rolled up. She has her arms showing, her strength. All those things is basically telling women, you do have the strength, you do have what it takes to do these jobs that normally are considered just men's jobs. And they will. They'll go into all these industries that before were not considered theirs. Now, the only problem was that salary. They're going to get paid about 60% of the salary of men, because it was kind of like known that if a man works, it's because he's supporting his family. If a woman works, it's just to, extra money for the family. So it was kind of okay and accepted because of discrimination that women should accept less for the same exact job, even if they were doing a better job than the guy who was still next to them. So women are going to play a big role. Minorities will as well, both in the country and in the military. African Americans will move into cities, Chicago, New York, get into over here in LA, and get into all these industries, and they will provide the cheap labor force that these industries needed to support the war. African Americans will also get in the military. Now, just like in World War I, they were not fighting soldiers to begin with. In World War I, they enlist for their country to go fight for their country, and they become the workers of their country. They get to clean, they get to cook, they get to do those type of jobs. There's a lot of racism in the military, and basically they were seen as people who could not fight, who could not be trusted to fight. World War II starts, same thing. They're once again the cleaners, they're once again the cooks, they're once again the waiters, stuff like that. But because the war was so huge and they needed so many soldiers, eventually they will let them in, and they will fight, and they will fight bravely. But they let them in segregated units. And segregated units means separate. They cannot trust the black soldiers to be with the white soldiers. So the white soldiers stay here and fight. The black soldiers are here and they fight. No mixing together. Now, African Americans are going to prove themselves very, very valuable in the war, because they're going to fight kind of like a chip on your shoulder. And the chip on your shoulder kind of means that you have this thing that's pushing you and pushing you to do more. For African Americans, they were trying to prove to everybody that they were real Americans, prove that they were smart as everybody else. All those racist things that people thought, they're wrong. They are just as good as everybody else. So they fought bravely, and they were very, very well decorated with medals. More medals means the more things you achieve during the war. And they are going to open up the eyes to many people in the military just how good of soldiers they are. And they will earn the respect of many people who before did not respect them. Another group that was like this was the Japanese Americans. Japanese Americans will also fight bravely for their country. In fact, I talked about that chip on the shoulder the African Americans had. Japanese Americans must have had a big, huge rock on their shoulder, because for them, they're fighting against Japanese, the ancestors of their parents. And something's going on in the country right now at home. They're fighting for their country, and at home, their parents, their little brothers, their little sisters are being incarcerated, put into internment camps. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. So Japanese Americans, as in the military, they kind of are seen as almost like spies. So they had to prove themselves beyond a shadow of a doubt to be real Americans. And thus, that meant that they took a lot of chances, and they also accomplished a lot. So Japanese Americans did a lot. Navajo are going to be very, very important. The Navajo code talkers, who are going to create a secret code using the Navajo language. The Navajo language was very obscure. Barely a few people knew it. I doubt anybody in Japan ever heard of this Navajo. So when you have a code, it's a secret, and you send secret messages to each other. Well, both sides, the Japanese, the Americans, they have people to try to break those codes. And if you break the code, then you know what the message says. Well, the United States had the code, plus they had the Navajo language, so it was like a double code, and the Japanese were never able to break it. We broke theirs, and in the Battle of Midway, which we'll talk about in note number 7, huge advantage, and it changed the whole War of the Pacific, because we broke the code. So Navajo played a very important role. Mexican Americans, they also provided a very important thing, 2 different ways. One, in terms of the economy, they're going to create the Bracero program. The Bracero program was a guest worker program where Mexican people came from Mexico, came to the U.S., they worked, they harvested the crops. Once they were done, they went home. It's a guest program. But there was a lot of benefits to it. So the United States got cheap labor force, got the agriculture to feed people, and Mexicans came to work, and they got to go home. My grandfather was actually a bracero, and he was able to get his green card or his papers, documentation, become a citizen, resident of this country because of this program. And eventually, through that, he was able to get all my family on my dad's side residency as well. So it was an advantage for my family. The other way the Mexican Americans supported the war is because they went to fight. There were Mexican Americans fighting in World War II. So minorities are going to play a big role of society here at home and in the military out there. Another major change that happened is the economy. When you have a world war, your economy has to stop being a consumer economy and become a war economy. What does that mean? Well, you go from producing consumer goods to war supplies, meaning you go from producing shoes to boots. So there was many factories around the country who stopped making the stuff that they normally made and started making things that went directly toward the war. So if you made hats, you're now making helmets. That's just a simple example. If you had a company that made clothes, you had the machinery that you can make uniforms. So some industries are going to become war industries, and they get paid very well. The war is expensive. All wars are expensive. Money. So where do you get it? One of the places you get it is high taxes. And even though people didn't like it, paying higher taxes, that was one of the sacrifices that you were supposed to make as a real American. That you were supposed to sacrifice paying extra taxes. And paying taxes sucks. We all have to pay it. We all understand it. But when they go up, it does hurt a little bit. But Americans were supposed to be good Americans and you pay your taxes. The other thing they did to raise money was war bonds. Now, war bonds we talked about in World War I. Hopefully you remember war bonds are, anybody remember? All right, what war bonds are is they're a document that you buy from the government where you essentially lend your government money. You let them borrow money, they use it for the war, and then they pay you back later. Those are war bonds. And they were encouraging people, radios, movies, you go to the radio, you go to the movies, you listen to the radio, and there's commercials saying, please support your country, please support the military, buy war bonds. You're essentially loaning them money so they can continue fighting the war. So the economy is going to make some major changes. The War Production Board will be created. Their job is to make sure that the soldiers have everything they need to fight the war, including weapons, supplies, everything. They're also the ones who decide which companies go from being a consumer company to being a war company, meaning making regular stuff to making war stuff. Another thing that society had to do was they had to save food for the soldiers and save food to sell to other countries who were in war. So there was a lot of food rationing. Now, food rationing, that means, just like in World War I, they asked their citizens to sacrifice eating things like meat, wheat, to make bread, vegetables, sugar, salt. Those kind of things are things that are needed a lot in the military, both for our soldiers and to sell. So people were told, okay, next Tuesday, no wheat, meaning nobody eat bread. Next Friday is meatless day, so no meat. If we save all that extra meat, we ship it to our soldiers or we sell it, and again, help the war effort. On restaurants, they stopped putting the little basket of bread. When you go eat dinner in the little basket of bread, they took that off. And on the restaurants, they also had the little sugar caddies, where people who have the little things of sugar or a container of sugar where you pour to your coffee, they took those off as well. So if you wanted it, you have to ask. And you ask for a little bit. They would encourage people to grow vegetable gardens. They called them victory gardens. So the idea was if a neighborhood, if everybody grew a little bit, then you change. I got tomatoes, you got cucumbers, you got lettuce. We exchange. Then instead of buying them at the store, we create them ourselves, and we don't have, and those extra ones get to go to the soldiers or to be sold to other countries. So there was lots and lots of changes during the war. Lots of sacrifice, lots of you got to do it for your country. Now, there were some injustices during World War II as well. During wartime, we have had a history of abusing civil rights, and nothing bigger than what happened to Japanese and the Japanese Americans who lived in the west coast of the United States. As a result of the attack of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese and their government, the United States is going to pass Executive Order 9066, and this is a presidential order. And Presidential Order 9066 basically said that all Japanese or Japanese Americans, also known as Nisei, are supposed to be relocated off of military areas. Now, where was the military areas? Basically all of the West Coast, and moved into internment camps. Now, they are kind of like concentration camps. Obviously, they're not killing them like they did in Europe, but still, you lost your freedom, you lost everything that you had. They send you a notice, you have to leave, and you have to have everything with you in a bag or a backpack or something, and that's all you get to take. So think about everything that you have in your home. Think about it.